Hello and welcome to Phoenix Gaming. I am your host, Nick Henning.
And I'm Nick Henning.
And this is Board Game Center. We are here covering the Castles of Burgundy 2024 Ring Final, a 3-player Ring Final that's featuring the unstoppable JC Tao, who just made his way to so many finals throughout the course of this week, winning multiple rings along the way. You see the players shaking hands there. He is in seat 1, Joon Kim is in seat 2, and Rob Garrett is in seat 3. The players are choosing their initial locations, and we see that JC, having the privilege of going first, is going to go in that bottom right corner there as he's got a lot of nice connections that he can make, and he knows that he's got first crack at the available tiles. Looks like it's a good spot as Joon and Rob follow suit.
Yeah, this starting board really wants you to...
JC rolls a 3 and a 4. We've got a 5 and a 6 from Joon, and looks like Rob is sitting on a 3 and a 5 over there.
Starting board really wants you to pay attention to sort of the bottom part of the board. There's a lot of these kind of small regions that you can fill in.
Heading into the board, we can see that it is set up for 3 players, so some limited options that the players are going to have to grab as quickly as possible. We see that there's only 1 mine available in play right now.
And that mine really matters because that bottom right spot, that 3 mine spot, is only going to be grabbed by 1 player. The structure of this board doesn't reward going hard on a particular category in the same way that it does maybe on other boards, because everything's broken down into smaller chunks of 1, 2, and 3 sections. So in a lot of ways, this board is going to reward
making his
racing.
choice to spend one of his workers upping to a 5 so that he can get that first crack at that mine, which makes a lot of sense. That is usually a first grab, particularly with that nice little mine spot in the bottom corner that he can put onto. And then he's going to go ahead and sell so that he can grab the knowledge tile from the middle. Fortunately, we can't quite get a good look at it due to the camera quality here.
I think it's the tile that lets him claim things
we
from
can
the
figure
board.
out what it might be.
Treating his dice as plus or minus 1. So he's putting a lot of value on that over the game flexibility. It's going to generate a lot of phantom workers essentially over the course of the game as he's doing that. My counterpart here is struggling.
Not quite sure, but imagine when he uses it later, we'll figure it out.
Part of it is because
Joon here is sitting on a 5 and a 6. He doesn't have access to a mine anymore, so he might want to prioritize getting boats.
Boats are going to allow any player to sort of change their positioning, make sure that they get first crack at things. And further, there's boats kind of going all the way up the eastern side of this board. And so it's one of the easier things to claim, or one of the easier, collect all the spaces for this to claim. And it's going to give you rewards along the way and give you sort of that turn order.
See Joon really mulling over those options, wants to make sure that he doesn't leave anything unavailable for himself, as these first actions are going to lock him into some things that he has to do later in the turn. That's a 6 down to grab the castle of the Castles of Burgundy.
And a castle pickup here is really interesting. It implies that he's either going west or north this turn. Both are pretty likely. I think the northern one especially, just 1 boat gets you to another castle's location. So he's seeing the value in that accelerated action there. It kind of implies that he wants to get a boat here. So
we're also going to get another worker user here to get down to a 4, bring that 5 down to a 4 to pick up those boats that we mentioned a moment ago.
And so now he's already set to drop the boat, drop the castle, and then immediately take a wild, essentially.
Rob's options have been picked over given the number of people that rolled 5s at the beginning of this turn, somewhere where it really hurts to be going in his position. But his 3 is untouched, with some nice options there in terms of either getting a boat or I believe that is the building that gives 4 workers.
I think it is the building that gives 4 workers. And that's a building that I really highly value in this game. A lot of the brown buildings give you essentially 1 action. It's a kind of wild action, but that building kind of gives you 2 actions because every time you turn it
and he's into the idea of sailing, fixing this last in turn order problem for him.
So like we said, boats are pretty important, especially in the beginning of this game. So I'm not surprised to see Rob grab that from seat 3 with the dice that he has. Wouldn't be surprised.
Rob will also use a worker. So everybody used a worker in this first round, leaving JC with 0, Joon with 1, and Rob with 2 remaining.
Yeah, that 5 spot is pretty awkward. But Rob will use it actually just to sell, so he can get that extra silver piece. And that silver piece gives a lot of options here. He could pick up another castle, or pick up a castle, pick up a boat. And he will use those silver pieces to immediately snap up that boat tile, trying to get himself into a stronger position for movement later in the round. If he's willing to play less aggressively, he also could have used those silver to pick up, I believe it's a silver. We're still in the same order from the previous round, though. Yeah, JC looks like he has a 5 and a 6. Joon with a 1 and a 3 to break things up. And then Rob, unfortunately, stuck on a 5 and a 6 again. Having those duplicate rolls, especially after someone in turn order, can be kind of painful. As we've seen, players are kind of avoiding that 5 spot. They don't love the knowledge tile. They don't love, I believe it's a church for the brown building there. And that's because most of the time those church things, the good knowledge tiles, the much maligned 5 here is going to be used to pick up a pair of workers. And then one of those workers is going to turn that 6 into a 1 so that JC can keep up in the boat game. He doesn't want to fall too far behind. And the mine that you could get with the cathedral or the church is only going to... And that means that all boats in play have been taken here. It's only going to pay out. Rob is basically guaranteed to be going first going into the second round or the B round of the game, if people leave it for you. Joon, on the other hand, has a curious problem with the boat here, that if he wants to be going second next turn, he explicitly needs to place his boat after JC does. And this puts him in a really awkward position because, like we said, he probably want to use that boat to go north so that he can place his castle. And so now he's in a position where if he places that boat now and all the boats are already gone, he's going to be going third next turn because JC's just going to go right on top of him. So he has to now decide if he wants to delay in executing that plan. And if he does, it means his storehouse is going to be pretty tight. So he's going to have to pick something up, put it into play, and kind of keep this cycle from round to round. It's going to make it so that his dice are going to have to really cooperate. And we're leading with a 3. Picking up the building I think that's the building that makes a lot of workers. Which, as I've already said, I think is a really good action. So dropping this into play is not bad. The only kind of downside here is that it heads sort of south. If he uses the 1 and goes into that southwest spot right there, right below his castle, it doesn't really expand his board network all that much. He's already touching yellow spaces. He might instead be heading westward, and he could drop that, or he could increase that 1 to a 2 using a worker. He can increase his options. And if he gets kind of shoved into pastures this turn, he can go for those. He is largely required to place on the board or to sell a good. He can't pick anything else up as his repository is full now. But that 1 gives him multiple options. Yeah, and he can just sell if he doesn't want to play out of his thing this turn. But 1's pretty close to playing what he wants to play, so it makes a lot of sense that he's going to drop his worker here. Costs a little bit more to give himself some flexibility, so he's paying with the flexibility of workers for the increased flexibility on the board. And he will indeed turn it into a whole pile of workers, having the extra action options for what to do with his castle is, I think, really wise in this stage. And one very curious part about this is that Joon actually chose to spend a worker to move into the 6th spot there, across the board, making it easier for him ultimately to play out that other castle that he's picked up. So he's definitely planning on picking up some more farm animals as things go on. My compatriot called it the 6th spot, but he meant the 2nd spot. Looks like Rob really quickly took their turn, so we're going to have to back solve what he did. Looks like he picked up a castle. He picked up a church so that he could pick up that castle with the church play. And may have placed a building down. Can't quite see what building it is. I would guess that it's a building that let him pick up the castle, because it looks like it might be a church. That's right. And Rob didn't value spending the worker to head westward. First of all, he doesn't have the extra 4 workers to solve his problems, but second, because he's got a lot more flexibility. We've got JC on a 2-4, Joon on a 1-2, and Rob on a 2-3. A lot more flexibility with the camera. We're not in control. because he can just send those boats. He can send that castle northward and not have to worry about the turn order thing, because he can place a boat early, place a boat later, and he's going to be first next turn. So a double boat pickup early, really paying dividends already. JC's in a position where his board is kind of locked up right now. He needs to play something out, but he didn't get any freebies with his 2-4 roll, right? He's surrounded by... JC is pretty aggressively using his workers here, moving that 2 into a 3, allowing him to place this yellow knowledge tile down. Maybe he'll take an action that will tell us what it is. And now the 4, if it's the tile we think it is, gives a fair amount of flexibility about what to pick up, but that bottom half of the board has really been pretty picked over, which makes a lot of sense. So he could instead be looking to sell out his warehouse there just to have something to do with the 4. That's what he's going to choose. And the 4 here will clear out the rest of his warehouse, getting another silver coin for future usage. This isn't going to be very helpful right now, but he's got a lot of time to figure it out. Joon pushing the 1 out, grabbing what looks to be a victory point knowledge tile. And on these boards where the scores are going to be a little bit lower, that building he just placed, a little bit lower because they're not completing 4, and 5, 6 regions. And then he uses a 2 and a worker to put it directly into play. Those endgame scoring tiles are a little bit stronger. It also, I believe, matches the tile that he just picked up, so he knows already it's 4 points. He's going to probably pick up more of them over the course of the game. And apologies that my compatriot put his boat into play. And knows that he's safe because he can place his second boat essentially whenever, which will put him into first for next turn. And he will pick up the 1 warehouse good. Looks like he'll use the other die to pick up workers. Everyone's rolling. Keep in mind that our turn order now is going to be Rob, JC, Joon. And so Rob gets to lead the charge here. He moved that boat northward, so now he can use the and we'll see a warehouse double up. That has to be at least somewhat appealing out there. 2 and 6 from Rob, 1 and 3 from JC. And that 6 lands perfectly for the boats. I think, though, that double warehouse is not good. 6 for Rob might pick up a silver mine. Looks like we were right about that church. Now that we're zoomed in, we can see that the turn that we missed of Rob's, he must have picked up the church and placed it to pick up another castle. He will indeed use the 6 for the silver mine. And then will he use the 2 to place it? He will indeed. Picking up 2 silver, and then the question is whether he'll follow through with something in the middle. That silver mine is pretty great at this stage. It's got a fair amount of nice options available in the middle, a really good knowledge tile for the end game. He could pick up another castle here if he wants to play kind of a medium-term race there. He's willing to bide his time, given that there isn't anything that he is worried that his opponents are going to take out from in front of him. And some good brown buildings as well. JC on the 1 and 3. He may just pull the trigger and place his boat now. Pick up the 2 lots that are together in the warehouse. This more or less guarantees that he'll go last in the B round, but he doesn't necessarily get to make the choice about that anyway, unless his opponents specifically don't play around him. Yeah, the reason he can't make that choice is that Joon is after him. First thing he'll do, though, is a 3 to drop the mine in play, scoring a bunch of points. And then a 1 will pick up a brown building. The one town hall that lets you place additional brown buildings. Just to emphasize this turn order thing, if you move up, if you're a first player and you move up the track, then you're sort of one space ahead, but you're still first player. And so then a player who's behind you or was tied with you in the space, they move, then they move on top of you. And now they're before you in the turn order. And so if you're in a tied location with someone, the person who really has the power is the person who is later in turn order. They'll get last crack at it kind of before it matters most, which is usually by the end of sort of the A round, B round, or whatever it is. Got quite the zoom in here on JC's board. That town hall is going to give some flexibility about playing. I think my counterpart here said playing a brown building, but actually lets you play any building onto the board. And usually you're looking to clear out by the end of the round. There is only one action left this turn, so if you can clear up your board, it gives flexibility for picking things up at the beginning of the next turn.
Joon here on a 1 and 6.
And that's something every player is thinking about. Essentially, there's an advantage to going earlier in the turn, but if you have a full or busy storehouse, those tiles in the bottom left there, then your advantage of being first is greatly diminished because you kind of don't get to just grab everything willy-nilly, which is the real power of it. Joon didn't have to go through the pastures here. He instead used his yellow tile to get up and use the castle to aggressively claim this warehouse, which he's going to drop onto the board and immediately sell one of his warehouse tiles. I think that's the warehouse. I give them all names that seem like the right names. We'll say the warehouse is the building that sells what I call the warehouse
Drops
tiles.
his city into play. That also lets him pick up a warehouse, which he also drops into play, and immediately sells off his 4 lot, it looks like. Picking up silver. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what Rob decides to do on his turn with those extra silvers. You know, if he wants to buy something from the middle, he's going to have this storage issue that we were just talking about a moment ago. Joon here is forced to sort of continue delaying on his boat. JC has put him in this position because he's chosen not to play his boat out. He'll use the newly acquired silver to go really hard on these Castles of Burgundy, the namesake of the game. And so he's probably going to have to keep that castle going into the B round. Rob's last action of the A round here. Rob's still in first here. Looks like he rolls a double 3, JC a 3-4, Joon a 4-6. And I don't really think there's the last action of the A round in play that's interesting, but the double 3 really hurts Rob here. He wants a 5 and a 6 to play out his, expecting to see a lot of boats coming out right now. His castle and his boats, so he's going to have to pay through the castle from Rob. Costs a worker, maybe even 2. I think it was 2. Unless it's a 4, and it's just hard to tell. And drops his boat to score some points. Probably his last worker just becomes... Well, I mean, it could actually, if he had a 3, he could buy a tile from the middle, drop it with a 3. Rob will break up the nice warehouse, but won't be able to take advantage himself. He takes the workers so that he doesn't get stuck on his next turn. This is really a bummer. I feel like that knowledge tile that pays you for your... shipped goods is a pretty good tile. It's worth a lot of points at the end. With a 3, he could have dropped that into play, but Rob is really valuing that flexibility. JC picks up some workers, and it does suck to go first and not drops down to a 2 with a spending of some workers, I believe, and then uses that to place his boat into play as well. A little bit of a better roll for Rob would have set him up more. It's pretty clear that powerfully. JC's tile there is one of the ones that modifies dice, I believe, on placement. Just not quite sure what color it's for. It's
So we're picking up once again. And JC also valuing scooping up workers before the beginning of the next round. A consistent play.
Boat placement here from Joon will put him into second for next turn. And there are enough warehouse lots in play so that he does not get stuffed being last here.
Sometimes if you delay this boat thing for the turn order thing, you just aren't going to get warehouse tokens.
Rather than fill up his storehouse, he'll pick up 2 workers.
That's more relevant in a 4-player game because there's 3 players.
And with that, we will move into Phase B.
And we'll see you at the beginning of Phase B.
We're back. A lot of boats in the middle for this turn, and an additional mine. Plus, of course, it's the odd turn, so an additional mine there. So mines will become much more plentiful.
And this flood of mines.
Castles, however, are in very short supply. Probably best, actually, for the players that don't already have mines, because they're a little bit away from getting up to that mine. 4 and a 5 from Rob. 4 and a 5 from JC, and a 4 and a 5 from Joon. Our turn order right now is Rob, Joon, then JC. 4 and a 5 is not a bad opening roll here. 5 lets him crack at the silver mine if he wants to get at that first. 4 lets him grab a boat to continue contesting that first place thing and just kind of push his boat farther and farther ahead. Also got a lot of flexibility here with the silver coins that he kept from last turn. So even though there was good stuff that he passed up, there was certainly an option for him to, scoop up, or there's now an option to scoop up some other things going first. He's got a completely cleared storehouse here, so he can kind of grab whatever he wants to out of play. Rob will snap off the 5. And picking up a knowledge tile. Can't quite see what this knowledge tile is. Yeah, I don't think I ever quite make out what that is. A little bit of a pump fake for the boat there. And instead, he grabs some goats, it looks like. The animals is a really interesting choice here. In a lot of ways, the animals are... And finally, he will pick up a mine with a couple coins. The highest ceiling points you can score on this board, right? Because they're the 3 sections, which scores 6 points, and the animals can score, and score again. So, with the right kinds of animals, you could score 4, and then 7, and then 10, or something like that, plus closing the region. So the upside of having good animal collections is really high. It's a little awkward in a 3-player game because the game might randomly not deal certain animals out, and so kind of committing early tends to be a little bit more 5 helpful. Here from Joon will pick up the mine, and the 4 here will pick up the boat. But I feel like a lot of times on most maps, filling out those 3 regions feels almost like a trap. The difference between, 3 and 6 points is not as much as the pain in the butt that it is to finish out the region. So, finishing your 1 and 2 regions is great because you score the bonus points 10, 8, 6, 4, 2 for completing them earlier in the game. And those 3 regions, they live in a little bit more of an awkward space. JC cracks off with a pair of coins. You're not necessarily excited to close them at the end because you want to be closing regions that are 4, 5s, and 6s. But those don't exist on this board, so suddenly finds himself a boat. A little bit more interesting. Like he's not so happy sitting in last place anymore, and uses a worker to pick up a Castle of Burgundy. Uses his last die, the 5, to drop that castle into play, and speed out a boat, which will move him from last into first. And I really like this aggressive boat. Our turn order next round will be JC, Rob, and Joon. He basically has upended the order very quickly, upending the structure of him having been overtaken in turn order. My compatriot and I tend to say the same things, even if they're many hours apart from each other. And putting the pressure on the other players to deal with that. He's also going to get crack at 5 and 6, 5 and 4 from JC, 5 and 3 from Joon, and 4 and 2 from Rob. Which will put him basically in the driver's seat in terms of controlling the... JC still has a full warehouse. That 6 might be eyeballing the mine in play.
He's got a 6 here. I think that's a good roll for it. So I'm pretty sure he's convinced that he's taking the 1 mine. Then it's just a question of what else he's doing. You notice he placed his boat up and to the left there to give him sort of more touch points. Which it does. And it picks up a silver mine. And another die becomes a 6 to pick up the silver mine.
Silver mine's nice
I think actually at this point, I'm realizing that JC's knowledge tile is to modify a die for picking up something from the board. We got there. Which is why he valued it so early on the first turn. The silver mine, you know, people are generally pretty broke on silver at this stage in the game. We saw Rob already used 2 silver. And so it gives, you know, a pretty comfortable grab into something in the middle there. There's some sheep, which are solid, as we just talked about. You might want to move into pastures in this game. There's a boat, which is obviously very exciting for all the reasons that we've talked about. And a couple buildings. Rob's goats will join play, or pigs, or whatever 4 animals those are. Opening up places where Castles of Burgundy can go. I don't think there's any left on the board right now, so he's going to have to wait until next round. But having the ability to pick one up and immediately drop it down. And Rob's second die will pick up a building. Looks like the one that gives you 4 workers. And as we've discussed, that's already a favorite building of mine. Plus, it's one that Joon is extra incentivized to take because I think that's his 4-point. Joon here full up. Style. The 3 conveniently drops the mine into the bottom corner of the board, scoring a pile of points. And so now everyone has sort of that bottom section there covered in a very similar way. And Joon has opened up some space in his storehouse. But as you're looking at this board, the place that's really exciting to head is west from here, right? There is the 2 yellow, the 6 brown, and the 5 dark green, which are all nice, easy, small places to close out. So starting in the bottom right gives a lot more flexibility of which regions to go to, and a couple 2-fers that close really quickly. But heading west then opens up those 1-er buildings, whereas heading north, because Joon has chosen to add a worker here, 6 will pick him up some farm animals, which we've suddenly gotten very aggressive about. Just really emphasizing why that bottom right opening is so powerful here. Turn order remains JC, Rob, and Joon. JC going boxcars here. Saw Joon with a 6-1, and I believe Rob also rolled a 6. 6 is everywhere. This is one of those forms of variance in Castles of Burgundy when you get people who are, you know, rolling the same numbers over and over again. That lot becomes much crappier, and so it's not just you rolling the numbers, it also matters that the table is rolling those numbers because everyone starts grabbing from that region. You can see that there actually is just no 6s remaining, and we're, you know, halfway through the round. JC toying over his limited options, changes the 6 into a 1, and uses it to drop the pick up another brown building. I call it the tent, I don't actually know what it is, which he uses to pick up the town hall. I really like the town hall. Obviously, it's a very flexible additional action. A lot of the brown buildings JC's working with no workers, but that one of placing making the dice work in the way that he best can works with almost everything. And usually you have more specific numbers you're trying to get at certain points in the game, so it just gives you a lot more flexibility when it might be most crucial. Our first die here for Rob, the 6, lets him drop his worker house into play, picking up 4 additional workers and scoring a bunch of points. Looks like Rob is the first person to break 50. And since you're shooting for a score of 200 or something like that, and I would say we're about a quarter of the way through the game. Seems about right. In a lot of Euros, the ramping of the score is much more significant later. But I don't think that's quite true in Castles of Burgundy because of the early bonus for closing regions. The 6th side of the map has been really sopped up. I think that seesaw scoring, sort of close fast. Looks like Rob's second action maybe picked up a boat. Close fast versus close big is actually one of the design choices in Castles of Burgundy that really does make it stand out. And Joon's one here is going to drop a boat, score a bunch of points, scoop some warehouse stuff, and this will put Joon now into first place for next turn. That is until more boats get dropped into play. First position, I should say. That spot, I think, was a double warehouse twice. Just people are full up and haven't cleaned out. Julian used a worker to drop his 4 goats into play. Pump fake with the card there. And we're heading into the 4th action of the round. So we're going to have to start thinking about clearing out those storehouses. We see that Rob and JC are full out. Apologize for my compatriot here. We were trying to fix the board. 1 and a 3 here from Rob. 2 and a 6 here for JC. 3 and a 6 here for Joon. A lot of 6s this round. Leading with Joon. Got to move our board game center up now. Okay. Let's do this too. Make a little bit more space for when we're on Rob's. Super. Okay. So Rob and JC have 3 tiles in their storehouses, which they're looking to drop into play kind of over the next 2 action turns. And they have 4 dice to do that with. So maybe they'll pick something up, like JC, for instance, lets them drop a double town hall, or like, you know, two buildings in play at the same action, or they just pick up some extra workers. So they're going to kind of be spending down. Whereas Joon here is going to refill, play out, but also has a wild. Will change his 6 into a 5 right for his Castle of Burgundy. Joon is a floating open action. So we can claim anything on this play. Pretty picked over board. Oh, there's still a boat up top, which might be of interest. A couple interesting buildings, maybe. I think that's a warehouse building there. He's got full warehouses, so that's not a terrible choice for him either. More goats, I think, over on the side there. He scoops up a boat. It's going to put him in good position for next turn order. Doesn't play out terribly nicely right now. I could see him using that 3 just to pick up workers with the hope of essentially using the boat next turn and then maybe selling something out of his warehouse. And the 3 will scoop up some more goats. I like the goats more than what I suggested because he's already set on goats there. 3 goats pretty good to connect with already his setup structure. JC's had some time to consider his options. He snaps a 2 out for a worker. And then uses a worker with the 6 to place one of his mines into play, knowing that the end of the round is coming pretty soon. Yeah, maybe not. Rob's also had time to consider his options. Completes his mine, breaking 60 up there with Joon. And both of these players know that they can't quite see where JC's score tile is. I assume that he's probably in the same category of 60 there. It's actually down right by 30. I think his score's at 29 right now. And then Rob will drop one of his knowledge tiles into play. Looks like a victory point knowledge tile that we didn't comment on earlier. Not quite sure which one. Yeah, and that big score gap
And
is
shoot him up
because
past 70.
JC hasn't had the chance
Looks
to.
like JC's all the way down at around 30 or so.
Hasn't had the
Maybe
chance
even
to
20.
close as many regions. Got a little bit of extra work to do. He's been playing out aggressively for,
Snake Eyes for Joon.
control over the mine spaces, control over the boat spaces, but it has mean that he's missed
This is the
one or
last
two
action
closeouts.
of this round. Dropping the boat will make Joon no better at being first player next turn than if he didn't, but it will clear out some space on his storehouse. Also, picking it up prevented other players from gaining it.
Right, so this is because Joon is tied with them. If Joon advances on the boat track, he's still first, and whoever advances still beats him. So does it make sense to do it now? Depends on your tiles. You could use a worker to drop the goat into the pasture there. That would be reasonable. But if he did that and didn't pick up workers with his other die, he'd be going into the next turn with no workers available. I can't see the available warehouse tiles, but in a lot of ways I like playing the boat, just admitting that if someone else moves, so be it. And then picking up workers, leaving the goat spot for next turn. Doesn't feel great to use a die and a worker to play the goats out. The 1 becomes a 2. Looks like he's going to, though. It might be a goat. Yeah, he decides he wants to use the boat much more defensively. Which is fine. Essentially, he could do the same thing JC did at the beginning of the round here, where he can go and essentially jump immediately from second into first, so mitigating that not being first next turn if someone does overjump. And rather than using his boat, Joon will use the 1 to clear out his warehouse so his boat can pick up goods, and he can take advantage to jump over someone later rather than being the first one into an empty spot. And it does look like there would have been things for his boat to pick up there. That's the choice I would have made, so it'll be really interesting to see if that pans out.
1 and a 4 here from JC. Looks like we're spending some coins to pick up a boat. And then we will use the town hall to drop that boat into play.
This worked out really
Closing a section here, scoring some many needed points, and moving JC into first for round 3, or the C round.
Bit behind. The timing of that boat worked out really great. The fact that it was still available. Of course, if Rob here decides that he wants to go first, he's going to be going first.
Rob here immediately is going to take away that first person privilege, using the boat that he's been holding on to for a little while, and dropping JC into second. Looks like a good pickup for his warehouse too. And he'll clear it out a little bit. That'll bring us to the end of round B. We're going to move forward into C after this. JC is picking up some silver for his mines. Every player has mines, but JC just happens to have 1 extra. And we're back. Looks like we have a mine in the middle, some brown buildings, some goats, a boat. Definitely a couple of good first come, first serve picks. Double ring warehouse is a little bit interesting too.
Yeah, that 3 spot seems to just pick up all the warehouse tiles for some reason.
There's only going to be 1 mine available this turn. JC is the one who's most interested in it, as he'd actually be able to finish out his set. We see Rob here with a 3-6.
And even JC might be the most interested. Every player likes grabbing mines, and if they can posture,
so he's grabbing that 6 there. Might be looking at a castle. No, he wants the mine.
He's got the coins. He can grab both mines and essentially take control, which he does. And looks like the 3 becomes a pickup for the other mine that's in play. Oh, I said there was 1, but apparently there was 2, and I missed it. I believe he had to use a worker to pick up that second one. This will give Rob the closure on the mines. That's probably painful if you're in JC's seat, but can't frankly be too surprising. The fact that it flips into the middle was the he picked the mine up from the center. That makes far more sense. And he does indeed pick up a Castle of Burgundy. Not the ideal
Fairly
role
expensive
for Rob
in terms of worker costs,
but gives him good control over 2 categories. JC with a 3 and 5. Man, the first priority was picking up mines. At this point, it might instead be pivoting to boats. If there's interesting knowledge tiles out there, he might be interested. Heading to the west, you know, those 1 spots are still worth 6 points in this round. That could be of interest. Spend some coins to pick up a boat and immediately drop it into play. Grabbing the double rings, pushing the turn order advantage. And this will prevent Joon from jumping over him, so JC is going to go first next turn. Yeah, exactly. And he gets a double pickup there. It's nice and clean. Immediately closes the region for 6 points. And he chooses to close a small region. 5 becomes a 6 to pick up a Castle of Burgundy, rather than advancing on the larger region, because I think ultimately he knows he's planning on closing every boat region this game. That is an objective that he has. Double 6 roll from Joon here. Not as exciting after the 6s have been picked over. There are, however, goats there, which is pretty appealing. There are some goats that probably appeal. He's not competing for them, so it's just kind of a question of whether he thinks an opponent would take them. It's also got 2 silver, so he has an option there. Yeah, seems like his back is up against the wall here. He's really mulling this one over. Doubles have a tendency to do that. I could see also some interest in that church in terms of grabbing some of these yellow tiles in play. Joon's already dropped a few browns and might just kind of continue closing small brown sections as a way of scoring points throughout the course of the game. If he kind of pairs browns with yellow tiles for endgame scoring, he could set up for sort of a long-term payoff. That could be one structure, and he could essentially be at this point saying, well, you know what, I'm going to concede boat combat, I'm going to lose mine combat. Instead, I can really focus my efforts here on grabbing that last castle spot, which he saw that he connected his goats to last turn. And then beyond that, probably doing pastures. But he's asking himself, well, if I'm giving up on mines, I'm giving up on boats. That means I want to pivot into doing these other things. And I don't want to take knowledge tiles at this stage that are infrastructure based. We're pretty much halfway through the game. So I'd really rather focus on tiles that are going to be just pivoting into points. And I do think that there are some economy tiles that might be worth considering even at this stage of the game. But because this is a game where you're scoring all game long and those scores tend to be pretty flat because of that seesaw scoring, the closer you get to the end of the game, or the sooner you get, how am I saying this? In a lot of games, you do that pivot maybe a third of the way towards the end of the game where everything becomes victory points. I think that's a pretty reasonable argument to be made that Castles of Burgundy, that pivot is a little bit earlier and it might be closer to now. I mean, at the end of the day, actions are still... This was a 2.5-hour game of Castles of Burgundy, so if there's any doubt about which of the 3 players are taking the lion's share of our time, this is an ideal example. And that can happen when people in front of you in the turn order... looks like he's about to commit. Have bought out a lot of the section that you've looked into, but he doesn't like it. He also might be looking, I guess, at the... He could say, I'm going to do boats and then go into that 1 up top. Looks like a building pickup there. So he'll drop the building into play on the 6 there. That's the church, giving him the option of any mine, knowledge, or Castle of Burgundy tile. It's a little bit of a greedy play. He's really saying, I don't think that the other players are interested in taking the Castle of Burgundy tile would be nice, but they've been claimed. So instead, he will claim a knowledge tile for victory points. And it looks like he quite see what building that's for. I'll make these clear that he's prioritized the victory point buildings over the others. Yeah, it's good. Turn order is now JC, Rob, then Joon. JC rolling those dreaded set of doubles with the 4s there. 3 and a 2 for Rob, 6 and a 2 for Joon. JC quickly changes the 4 into a 3 and then uses both dice to pick up the rest of the boats. So let him close that out, cap out the entire boat scenario by the end of this round if he likes, or he can slow roll it. Rob does have a bit of a storage issue here. You see what his rolls were? I wasn't paying attention to myself. He can use the castle to accelerate things out here. Pick up workers here gives Rob some needed flexibility. Yeah. So that he can drop one of his mines into play. I feel that Rob's dice have forced him to take numerous worker actions throughout this game. That is the problem with filling up your storehouse, is that if the dice don't cooperate too well, you end up having to pay. It's the biggest moments of luck in this game, when your storehouse is full. And naturally, that's just a part of how you're setting it up, especially if you have kind of a more rigid game plan, which happens when your storage house gets full, or when you are really kind of gunning for winning certain categories and an opponent is competing with you on them. That generates tension. Having some more diversity, Joon here flicks out the 2. Placing something. And the 6 picks up the goats that we talked about last turn. What was the 2 for? He put out the knowledge tile that he claimed last round. That's what scored him points. Yeah, he gets to get those points wise. We do still see Joon in the lead, a little over about 10 points more than Rob, who's at about 20 points more than JC. 1-5 for JC, 2-2 for Joon. Same turn order as last round. If JC wants to pick anything up, he's going to need to drop some boats into play. He does have a worker to make that 1 into a 2, which he does. It's expensive. It's a pain. You know, the castle that he picked up is great. They're very powerful, the most powerful tile in the game, easy to close regions. But in this case, he has to kind of big old stack of rings in a way that he hasn't really set up his gameplay to do. So it's good to kind of put the pressure on his opponents to not get that, and we'll pick up some mediocre cows, it looks like. Yeah, or maybe pigs. Probably just as a way of getting westward. I think this is also an acknowledgement of the fact that those pastures are going to be a big part of the scoring, but it's also a relatively noticeable Rob block, I think, because it looks like Rob has those kinds of animals. Rob's got a 5 and a 3 there. Finally, a roll that's a little bit more favorable. 3 could immediately be used as well. Picks up a boat, pushes it into play. Keeping him out of range of Joon jumping into second place. And one of the advantages of playing your dice when they do fall in the way that you want to is you keep a little bit more workers for when your dice are not cooperating with what you're doing. So Joon is going to be last in turn order here, pretty much guaranteed, as I believe all the other boats have been sopped up. And he's stuck again with a double roll of a 2-2 here. Does make me wonder if dropping that boat last turn would have made more sense. Joon's single boat here really has not done him any favors at this stage. If he is acknowledging that he's boat loser here, since all the boats got picked up, he might want to just ignore that middle 3 row, kind of build around and drop that boat all the way up top in the single 3. But it's going to take some work to get there. And so it's going to really clog up his storehouse in the meanwhile if he does do that. This 2 here is also pretty crappy for dropping out that goat that he has. He can at least use one of them to sell some grapes. So this could be a turn where he does like warehouse grapes, workers. It doesn't pick up anything from the board. Can't quite see what's on the board right now. So I'm not sure if he'd be valuing anything out there. But he has more of a need for those knowledge tiles, I would say, than other players at this stage. So if there's anything with points over in that 2 region over there, he might be considering that. He doesn't have any workers right now, though, so one of those dice almost certainly is going to go to workers one way or the other. There you have it. First 2 is used for picking up workers. Pay some coins in to pick up yet another knowledge tile. That one, can't quite tell what this one is. Looks like maybe it has something to do with silver coins. Yeah, it's not victory points. The version of the rules that I find online are not for this copy of the game. When I do find this copy of the game, it's like a preview version that stops right before it explains all of them. And along with the worker, that tile will get dropped into play, allowing for some more northward expansion. And so he might be setting up for that boat, just like we talked about. It's going to have to drop some buildings to make that happen. The other problem that Joon has is that 5-6 for Joon this turn. He's been the first to get still in the same turn order of JC, Rob, and then Joon ending up. JC does a quick check of what everyone has. I believe we're on the last action of this round. He's been the first to get set up for the Castles. Past the halfway mark of the game for sure. But he might not just get to grab one of them based on the turn order situation of the game. Other players might grab it out from underneath him before that happens. Rob in particular is set up to take the Castle of Burgundy bonus before him. JC needs to consider if he wants to move westward on his map so that he can pressure the Castles of Burgundy situation, given that he is going to be doing better in turn order. But he actually just can't place those castles. Looks like we might have dropped yet another boat into play. Don't see any buildings. Still a pretty full board here. I think that was a worker pickup. Might have been a worker pickup and a warehouse delivery, if I'm remembering JC's board from last round. Rob here on a 6 and a 5. And so in order for Rob to, apply this castle's pressure, he needs to drop. You can see my green WSBG shirt is showing through the green screen. He either needs to go into the pasture or into the buildings section just above there. Since he has the dice, he might as well close out the mines. Looks like that will be some mine completion and the first to claim all the mines. First to claim all of the anything. Huge push and surge for victory points for Rob, pushing him around the board. First to break 100. My guess is that the other action was scooping workers or something like that. And we're halfway, and a player has broken 100 points. Joon here needs to, if he wants to continue this northward expansion, needs to kind of pick up a brown tile. He's got a 6 there. I don't know if it's set aside on purpose from his other dies. He knows that he's using it to place 5 and a 6 here for Joon, as we're either on the second to last or last actions of the C round, or depending on what building's available, he may just have maybe making other choices. He could certainly place his goats into play using the second 5. To last. He'll have to use a worker as well, but it's a way to clear out his storehouse. It really would be nice if he rolled a 4 eventually. Faces of our players. He's not in a huge rush. Picks up some workers, and then uses them to make a 4, so that he can finish his little goat field. But scoring a bunch of points. He can't have it that Rob is in first anymore. This may jump over him, since it is a 10, 16, 22 points. Yeah, big chunk shooting him into the lead. And that's what we were talking about with the pastures being kind of the highest. JC is trailing still by 10, 20, 30, 40 or so. The highest point potential in the game of all the regions. It's just generally true that the animals have the highest sort of like ceiling, but they're often like action inefficient compared maybe to some other things. Having not gotten essentially the little weenie closures on the western side of the map that Joon and Rob have. A 1 and 4 for JC, a 1 and 4 for Rob, and double 1s for Joon. Yeah, and it feels like JC's playing. JC quickly drops the animals into play, followed by his Castles of Burgundy to give him essentially an auto choice action. He's debating whether he wants to be done with sailing or whether he wants to push it, since he has some time available to him. Time available because Rob's not necessarily jumping over him. What I was going to say is it feels like JC's playing very well in terms of like posturing for position, using his position well. He's really used that knowledge tile that he got at the beginning to great advantage, to have flexibility of picking things up. However, he just doesn't have the points. He just hasn't closed the same regions that Rob and Joon have. And that's, at the end of the day, his board is not necessarily suggesting that I can easily make up this 30-point deficit here. Of course, he's got a couple unrealized things, and JC will opt to use the wild to take 2 workers. But not as much as you would like. And it's pretty awkward to use the wild to take the 2 workers there, but I think it's something that he probably has to do because he doesn't want to put more stuff in his storehouse. It's definitely a bit awkward. Rob's got a 6 and a 1. Rob's not looking to fill his storehouse too much since we're at the end of the round here. But not a single one of those numbers matches the 3 tiles in his warehouse. So that's a bit of a bummer for him. However, he can pick up and drop off something. Picks up a silver mine, which he promptly drops into play. And opening up a region on the western side of the board. I think it would have been an interesting and valid choice on Rob's part to have paid a worker. Actually, I don't know if he had a worker, but if he had a worker, to pay the worker. 1 here is finally a nice match for that boat, to put that silver mine on the 1 spot, because then it would connect to the Castle of Burgundy. And then next turn, he could pretty quickly scoop up the castle and drop it down and be the first definitively to claim that bonus. Again, I didn't see if he had that worker, and it's a little bit risky because if his dice don't cooperate with him next turn, he already used the worker. That hurts. But setting up the potential for an accelerated steal in a highly contentious category, right? Three castles is what every player has. Is a nice way to put yourself in a comfortable position next round. Looks like he does have at least one worker. But again, might not be willing to kind of take that risk. Joon here actually does have some options of things to pick up. A knowledge tile that increases worker flexibility, which I think is not very good usually. But if you have really crap rolls, that might come into play. And he could pick up the building for pasture tiles.
First, we see a pickup of the town tile that lets you pick up either pastures or boats. Good chance that Joon is going to try to close pastures first this game, having a head start and being connected to the northwest.
And while it's not great to have his storage be filled at the beginning of the round, if he puts this into play, he can use it to immediately fill it with something. So it's not the worst option of a building to carry over from round to round. It also means that he essentially has almost any roll except for a 3.
And the 1 will turn into a different number so that he can clear some space in his warehouse.
For the brown buildings that he could just drop off next turn, giving a little bit more flexibility. I do think it's really interesting that he spends the worker to pay something out of his warehouse here. That feels like a pricey warehouse delivery.
That'll take us into the D round. We close towards the final legs of the game.
My guess is that the Joon is hoping that he doesn't have to essentially ever take...
And we're back. 4-5
again.
for Rob, 2-5 for Joon, and we're leading the charge with JC at a 3-4. Turn order is JC, Rob, Joon.
And we just have the one Castle of Burgundy in play here. None flipped into the middle, which is a
plenty of mines available. Some additional farm animals in the middle.
I don't remember what JC rolled here, but there's got to be a lot of desire to grab that castle. If he didn't roll near a 2, there is a church at 4, which he could pick up and drop into play. There's also a church actually in the middle, and JC is got some successful mines, so he could grab one of those tiles. And it actually looks like there's 2 churches in the middle, so he's definitely going to find some way to grab that castle.
Three turns into the Chew to pick up a Castle of Burgundy.
That's easy enough. And now, because there's only the 1, he's got all the time in the world to drop that into play. I mean, for the rest of the round, but still, that's 8 additional actions to make it happen.
Spend some silver coins to pick up a knowledge tile.
I think it's the knowledge tile that rewards you for different animal types, which, given that he's got the 2 pigs or whatever it is a pretty nice play.
And a worker allows the placement of that knowledge tile, which looks like a victory point knowledge tile for maybe placing different animals. He can play animals, punish other people for collecting their animals, and play spoiler, sort of, without it hurting him that badly. Since also the animal pastures are only up to a 3 size, it is not too bad. You know, if that tile, I think, is much weaker if the pasture sizes are 4, 5, 6, because you're really missing out on a bunch of points by going for diversity. But the smaller the pastures are, the better off that is. Usually the smaller pastures are, the less exciting they are too, but because this map has this just sort of everything is small, it sort of has that aspect to it.
everything in small maps do mostly reward accelerated points, and so I do feel like JC is playing from behind at this stage. Rob with his 4 and 3 will spend some silver coins picking up a church. Church is interesting because he will drop that church into play. Tile. He grabs one worth 1 point. Scooping up a knowledge tile. Looks like a knowledge tile that gives some victory points. As we're closing this last stretch here, and he will pick up a boat. Using the church to do that is interesting. Rob is essentially saying, look, really all I'm looking for at this stage of the game is victory points. Might also be one that has several buildings that he already has copies of. I wouldn't be surprised at that. Can't quite see the board, but if Joon was able to grab a Castle of Burgundy and drop it into play before JC does, that would be ideal. That being said, I believe that JC claimed the only Castle of Burgundy there was. That's right, he did. So since that castle isn't happening, Joon's got to be asking, what am I doing this turn? And I think the plan of browns and yellows and light greens is kind of the primary list here. So if he could pick up 2 light greens that are matching, that's a really good get, right? Like he could place that tile that he has into play, see what he can scoop up. Does he have silver coins here? He does. There's a fair amount of sheep in play, it looks like. Sheep over in 3 and in the center board if he wants to use some coins. He also might want to use those coins, though, to pick up the worker building from the middle. The worker building from the middle is extra points for him, and it just means that he doesn't have to necessarily be taking that worker action, as he's just using that building to do that. So he might be looking at that and being a bit more interested in the benefits that can afford him. I think this game is running pretty late because, and we see indeed there are no dark greens, no more Castles of Burgundy available. JC using that first in turn order to make sure that he flexes on that position. Yeah, there is no one else in that hall right now. Looks like Joon does indeed like the worker building. It's like a pickup of the workers building, although I don't quite know what method was used for it. Maybe coins? Was coins. Must be coins since there are none remaining. I think he's debating his sequencing, but I'm pretty sure that he uses the 5 to drop the building up north so he can keep moving towards where he needs to go for his boat. And then he can use the 2 tile to pick something up. That 5 will turn into a 6, allowing to drop off that worker building, picking up a bunch of workers. Yeah, and this journey is a disciplined journey with that boat because it's been taking up space for a long time, not really doing its job. Of course, this is, I think, more of a required pivot. I don't think that Joon planned for this to be the case. It's just that other players prioritized boats a little bit more than he did in the C round, and that basically made it not worthwhile for him to contest. That 2 might have a town hall in its sights. And the discipline he has by, waiting for it to go north here is 5 points, right? If he manages to close it this turn. That is indeed the case. 2 picks up a town hall for Joon, and 2 there will pick up a town hall, which I've already discussed. I think is a very good. Next round, JC leading again. Joon with a 1-6. An ideal roll. I'm sure he was looking for a 4 there. JC very quickly snapping out an action. Oh no, looks like he was placing the initial warehouse tile. He rolls a pair of 1s. Looks like there's a town.
No real pressure
hall
on his Castle of Burgundy placement, though. Does need to make it at some point, but doesn't need to be now. And if there is indeed a town hall in one, he could pick it up and then turn the other one into a... First one will pick up a town hall. 6 to place it immediately. I want to talk a little bit about the boat situation. So JC's in a situation where he could close out boats at any time. But Rob also could essentially close out boats at any time. Which will turn into a 6, dropping the town hall into the bottom left. And immediately snapping that Castles of Burgundy into play, claiming the 7 points for that. Closing 2 single regions. A nice chunk of change to catch JC up on the board. If JC doesn't close the boats, then Rob taking a boat and placing a boat puts him into first, position-wise. And then Rob could take a boat and pick up a silver mine to finish out those silver mines. Second place there. And essentially claim those 7 points first. So it's sort of, it's almost like a reverse game of chicken. Whoever blinks first is going to get the 7 points. The problem is that it does become a game of chicken because really the other person goes and then gets the 4 points and moves first for the rest of the game. And so essentially whoever decides to blink upends the turn order, makes that decision. So the longer that JC can push this decision off. Rob's baiting his 1 and something else. The longer JC can push this decision off, the longer he can stay as first player. Until Rob says he's tired of it. Popular turn from town below him, though. And a drop of that knowledge tile into play. And a disciplined choice on Rob's part to play into essentially the bottom 2 there rather than the middle 3. He's acknowledging that he only thinks he's going to get 1 more yellow tile, take advantage of it. Joon's on a 1 and 6 here. Full storehouse. So he'll drop the town hall into play to accelerate out the other building, which will pick him up a pasture tile or a boat tile. He may just concede boats at this stage and move into pastures, picking up a sheep. I may have missed it, but if Joon used a worker for that 6 into a 1, I don't understand that play, rather than just placing it on the 6 on the left. I'm seeing a worker there, but I can't tell if it's like leftover detritus or whatever. I'm struggling to come up with a good reason for it. I guess there's a lot of places where 1s are useful and the 6s are not just yet. And we'll use those workers to push those sheep into play. Oh, never mind. He turned the 2 into a 1. And so he's actually just being aggressive with his workers. He didn't turn a 6 into a 1. He turned a 2 into a 1. That makes way more sense. So he did all the things he wanted to that turn, but he had to pay a couple workers for it, which he has the flexibility to do because he's got the worker building. Double 1s again for JC. It's pretty rough to get that twice in a row. 3-6 for Rob, 3-6 for Joon. Yeah, the 3 roll will let him place that boat in there. Top part of the board is pretty picked over. And it's finally JC's turn to be able to complain about luck in this game. Wouldn't be too surprised to see one of these 1s sacrificed to the worker god. I will say I don't have the sense like any player was particularly egregiously unlucky or lucky compared to the others. Maybe a couple key moments here and there, but nothing stands out to me as the RNG of the dice being a big... it's a quick round for tile pickups. The board's already looking pretty picked over. There are some of those workers we just talked about. And a pickup of a pigs. Chickens. Certainly animals. Rob's 3-6 here. He's got some tiles to drop into play.
Ideally, he probably wants that town hall on the left side there, but it's entirely possible that he's going for all the browns. I do mean left from the perspective of Rob, not from our perspective. So he wants to close out that little region over there. It's possible he could go for browns, but closing out 6 more browns, those 2-3 spots, not exciting. That's what I was talking about earlier with the awkwardness of this board and the scoring potential or lack thereof. Pick up here. And looks like Rob will scoop up a boat, the long-term plan, since he needs to finish his boats. And pick up some workers to offer some flexibility in future turns. Yeah, so he can drop all this stuff out at the next turn. Rob seems to follow a pretty consistent flow in this game. You know, he kind of fills up his storehouse, drops it down, fills it up, drops it down. It's the end of the round. He has a very regular, I would say, spike cycle. Joon might like to buy from the middle, but it looks like he's out of silver coins and doesn't even really have things in the warehouse to sell. Not enough, at least. Yeah, that is one of the downsides of not being in boats and not being in mines, is that you don't have the flexibility of buying things in the middle. You don't have to deal with the nonsense of boats and mines and the competition around it. He'll drop that boat into play, closing out that top section there. Excuse me, it's late. And expanding the warehouse. Immediately selling, it looks like both goods. Yeah, getting to do this when he gets a double is pretty sweet. Is it 1 or 2? Couldn't quite tell if it was 1 or 2, but it certainly was a nice pickup for a matching 6. And I think this is a reflection of both the number of players and also the sort of holding pattern that they've gotten themselves into, that we see these warehouses continuing to fill up, even though players have played boats in this game. We're rapidly approaching the new turn. Our 5-6 JC, 1-5 Rob, 2-3 Joon. And so we're going to see JC and Rob in the same position as last round, where they're going to need to start dumping out their storehouse. Joon has finally cleared out his storehouse for the first time, I think, in like a round and a half. But he's managed very well with it still being stuck there. And stuck being a relative term here. But 5 points are significant in this game. Every little bit can matter. 5 down to a 4 to finish out the mines. Scoring some points and picking up second place credentials. A few extra points as well. Yeah, 5 rolls pretty bad for JC here. There's almost nothing he wants to do with the 5. Having to use a worker to pick something up from the board, he'll pick up too. A thing that'll let him expand his pastures, building for picking up more pasture tiles. Theory, it also picks up boat tiles, but JC is at maximum boat capacity. I think JC is like kind of picking up random pasture tiles because he's sort of seeing a point in the game where the other players have been more aggressive on the yellows, so the yellows are not as good for him. He's not likely to close out his yellow regions. And so pastures then kind of become the next other thing. And it's not, the way that is does not give me a lot of confidence again for his position, because he is behind on points and he isn't coming up with big stuff that's going to follow it up. He's coming up with good stuff, but good might not be enough here. Rob will sell to clear out the warehouse a little bit, pick up a silver coin. He's got 2 boats, so it makes sense that Rob needs to make some room here and get some bonuses. We see a lot of 4s in play. And so it looks like it might have been a worker pickup with the last die. Indeed. And the worker pickup here means that Rob is looking to basically do maybe a triple drop next turn. Clear out completely. A quick pickup from Joon. Scooping up the brown building that picks up brown buildings. Joon's got a couple of brown regions. And he immediately drops it into play. Looks like he might be going for full brown buildings at this stage. Yeah, he basically has to commit to it at this point. And I think he's just doing that for worker efficiency. 3-5 for JC. 2-5 for Joon. And a 2-4 or 5 for Rob. And looks like we are in the last round of the D phase, with some very large warehouses available. The aggressive early grabs of boats means that more resources are available later in the game, also with 3 players, not 4, picking things up. JC will finally crack the bank here. He'll claim the 7 points. Unfortunately, he will end up conceding essentially first place position for player order if Rob decides to double place boats. And I don't know that this was JC's ideal, but I think it's the end of the round. He needs to clear the warehouse. JC places his other building, picks up some more animals. By warehouse, it means storehouse. And unfortunately, he has to put more back into his storehouse, which is a little tough for him. Rob's dice of a 2 and I believe it was a 4. Could be reasonable to drop double boats this turn. He also can use his town hall to drop one of those boats into play. That might be for the 1 spot. He's going to have to use 2 workers either way. So, I mean, he was looking for 1s and 3s, and 2s and 4s are close. They're not the worst roll. At this stage, it's very unlikely that Rob will do all brown buildings, so he may be looking to drop that town hall in the western location. Yeah, because if he drops it looks like he doesn't have a ton of specific goals going into the final turn. So he's probably debating that. Rob's ideal would be to finish that pasture with something pretty nice and pick up some yellow tiles, pick up 1 yellow tile. I mean, those really his main goals going into the last round. First worker goes down. Town hall in the western corner. Scores himself some points. Looks like he's almost at 120. All right, I have a bit of a freeze. We have a bit of a technical difficulty here where our file was corrupted. All right, sorry about that. Technical glitch. We had our whole file corrupted. And so we had to download again. But we're here. Rob is indeed placing both of his boats into play, claiming that second to complete the boats, but making him the first player for the rest of the game. Probably the better of the bargains between him and JC. We'll head on over to Joon, who's got a 2 and 5 to finish out round D. And we've tapped out the 5 to sell to the warehouse. We've talked a lot. That gives a needed silver coin. And he immediately throws those 2 silver coins in to pick up the sheep that were available in the middle of play. He found a line for picking up those sheep. That 2 is looking pretty ideal for dropping that sheep directly in. And he will for 7 points. We've talked a bit about how Joon and Rob are ahead because they've managed to expand to the western side of their boards earlier, closing out more smaller regions and getting those early points. And that'll close us out for round D. Quick pause as we'll head into round E. As we do, the scores are much closer than they have been for a lot of the game. Joon is leading caught up in a lot of those regions. About 10, 20, 30, 40, 143, with Rob and JC both floating around 130, give or take a couple points. But JC has not closed that western region. All right, yellow. Beginning of round E. We are looking at a 3 and a 5 here for Rob. And I expect a rush on yellow tiles this turn, as well as pasture tiles, as basically being the last things that are scoring. And there are priorities are a bit different, as we're just looking to close out our final loop of victory points. So we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pastures. And I think it was 4 yellows. Looks like 3 of them are endgame scoring. Rob will grab 1. Some coins will grab one of the only knowledge tile in the middle of the table. And those Castles of Burgundy, I think, are no longer relevant. I think everyone's full. Maybe Joon actually still needs 1. And some
looks like Rob
workers
needs one
will
too.
help him get the his last Castle of Burgundy, not the last one in play, but he will drop it out so that he can claim the 4 victory points for being second person to complete that. Yeah, and otherwise Joon would have been able to grab it later this turn. So Rob saw and paid for that. Part of the reason why he's always setting up his workers for those bonuses. But the extra actions that he's paid for picking up workers this game, I think, are definitely adding up in terms of fewer places placed. Like at this stage, we've got, let's count how many on each board are covered. JC's covered 2, 4, 8, 11, 13, 14, 15. He's got 15 uncovered, 2 tiles in the bank here. 3 and 6 for JC. And unfortunately for him, this is the awkward time to have the storehouse be full. So he's getting hurt from the setup on turn 4 where things are a little bit clunky and awkward. Dice were not cooperating, so he grabbed some okay stuff. But now he's got this okay stuff when he might be wanting to grab those yellow tiles, those pasture tiles. He's got to put stuff into play, and a 3-6 is not good at putting things into play. I could see him using a 6 to drop one of those pasture tiles up north just to not deal with having to use the workers for it. Pair of coins in, some animals out. I think he would have been happy to pick up some that yellow tile that Rob took so that he could use that 6 to drop the yellow tile in
north,
so
score
pretty
a couple
painful.
points.
And follow up with some more animals. So JC is going to put the pressure on the greeneries here. And so now Joon doesn't need to worry about claiming
1 and
that
3
last
for
Castles
Joon
of
here.
Burgundy. He is last there no matter what. And he doesn't even actually really need to close it. If he can, great. It's going to be worth the bonus 3 points, and it's free. It's a wild action for the cost of 2 actions. So, you know, is an action worth 3 points? Is functionally what it asks, and the answer is maybe. Kind of depends. He has got a lot of other things he wants to do. He needs to make sure that he closes that pasture tile, and there are only 2 remaining in play. So I think grabbing one of those pasture tiles is essential for him. If he doesn't close the pasture, it really, really hurts. JC we saw being, I think, again, appropriately aggressive by taking the pasture tile. That would have been a deal for Joon. Even still, I think that Joon needs to grab one of those pastures, make sure that he closes that mega region. JC absolutely is incentivized to grab another one of those pastures. Rob also is incentivized to grab one of those pastures because he needs a 3rd one to close his pasture region. Even if it doesn't match, it's still one of the higher number of points that he can get this turn. That, I think, might leave JC a little bit in the lurch with 5 of 6 pasture tiles, a pretty awkward number. If, however, Joon decides that he's more interested in accomplishing other things at this stage, maybe JC can get away with it. A 1 will turn into a 6 and scoop up a pair of sheep. Pair of sheep are very good, though, so buying the goats out of the middle doesn't even need to be something that Joon does. Although, actually, I think Joon doesn't have the silver coins, so actually can't even buy out of the middle. Ignore that. And the 3 here can pick something up. And the 3 here will pick up. Oh, it's another worker tile.
The building
That's
that gets some
great.
more workers.
It's 4 points for him, and he
I also
needs to
think it's
close
one
it.
of his endgame scoring tiles.
Doing double
needs to close
duty
the
here.
Browns.
Yeah, that's a really good pick.
1-4 for Rob, 1-6 for JC, 5-6 for Joon. One nice thing in going with the Browns when they're spread out is, I mean, obviously their points are pretty bad, but you don't have to worry as much about not getting the right brown tiles. Generally find something that'll work, as opposed to when you're filling out the 6 or 7 and you need to have different tiles and you're being very cautious about that. I've already emphasized how important I think that pasture is. It's unfortunate for JC because it's not as good for Rob as it is for JC. But I think even still, he can't let it go if he's got those 2 silver coins available to him. It clogs him up a little bit, but the main challenge that generates for him is that he can't take some more maybe yellow tiles in play.
Although I think both those yellow tiles are whiffs for his current buildings, so they aren't so exciting. This is something that's going to work definitely in Joon's favor, is that because the other players don't have those brown tiles, the yellow tiles are not as exciting for them. And I think we're going to really see throughout the course of this 5th round here, Rob and JC cresting a little bit more, whereas Joon's got a few more chickens that can come to roost, and he's in the lead. So I don't think that's going to be a blowout by any measure, but Joon is definitely setting the tempo, even having been last in turn order
Rob,
for
some
a good
coins.
portion of the game.
Looks like he picks up some animals of his own.
And that's the last pasture tile, cleaning it out. That's pretty painful for JC, but I think not too surprising to see happen.
Drops a knowledge tile into play.
Some score points here.
And ties up Joon.
If he can grab something decent from him to play, that seems better now, because the good stuff is going to go away even faster, because at the end of the game, there's just so many things that we don't care about anymore. Might have missed a step in there. Maybe he needed to grab workers or something like that.
JC drops some animals into play for 6 points.
Needs to make some room.
And sells things out of his warehouse.
He's pretty much on autopilot at this point. He knows exactly what he needs to accomplish at this stage. An argument could be made that I think he should have picked up one of those yellow tiles for
6
points.
here drops the last animal. Joon will pick up the first to complete pastures bonus. Moving back into first place. Breaking out of this adorable 3-way tie.
It was cool that they got to a 3-way tie at the end of the game. And so, yeah, when we look at Joon's board and say, what else are we trying to accomplish? It's play as many brown tiles as possible. We see a lot of those worker houses available in play, all of which are interesting to him. And he'll use his church from last turn to pick up the last yellow tile that he cares about.
And he will pick up another knowledge tile.
I think there's no way he's going to finish
more
all the
victory
knowledge
points.
tiles, but he doesn't need to. And our players have settled into a full clockwise turn order. Bless them.
Heading into the 3rd turns of the last round here. Rob rolls a 2-6, 2-3 for Joon, 2-3 for JC.
Rob here, yeah, I mean, ultimately his goals, he's got to finish dropping those animals into his pastures. That's kind of a non-negotiable. Beyond that, maybe pick up, if there's a tower out there, you can pick that up and drop it for a couple points.
Rob drops some goats into play.
He sort of hit his
Maybe
ceiling
make some
almost,
workers.
because everything that's left is kind of 3 square regions. Unlikely that he's going to finish
JC
them.
picks up a knowledge tile for victory points. And puts some animals into play for 5.
It might be for towers. So those victory points there are literally just for closing regions.
Play has picked up significantly as everyone is just trying to close out their final actions here.
There's only a few things worth points
Joon
remaining.
turns the 2 into a 1, picking up a whole pile of workers, ensuring that he'll be able to take the actions he wants to for the remainder of the game.
And then maybe buying the other worker house. Every one of them is worth 4 points. They're just better towers at this point in the game. I'm not sure that he's going to get to close all the browns. He might run out of actions before then. He's got a little bit too much that he's trying to do here. Oh, yeah, I was going to count how many empty spaces players have. So Joon's got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 with 1 in hand. So that's down to 11. Trying to figure out if he wants to pick something else up. I think it's only buildings at this stage. Just doesn't have the time to like pick up a boat, drop a boat, sell the warehouse. Doesn't score any points. Not interested in mines for the same reason. So it is just buildings. If he can grab a building now, he wants to grab it. Have a pump fake on the decision there. But Joon will then push in the 3 along with one of his new workers. To pick up a tower worth 4 points. And towers are towers, yeah. It's a little bit of a bummer for JC, who I think just picked up the tower knowledge tile. So 12 with 2 tiles and storage for Joon. 3-4 roll for Joon. 1-2 for JC. And also a 3-4 for Rob. 13 for Rob, the 1 in storage. So he's a bit behind essentially a number of actions here from Joon. Part of that is that he's had to sell more warehouse. 4 will drop Rob's last pasture tile into play there, or has had the privilege scoring a good chunk of points. But I think also part of it is the number of worker actions that were taken, which for Joon are very few. He's got the worker houses that have solved that problem for him, whereas Rob had to take a lot of worker actions this game. And looks like a warehouse sale for his second action of the round. JC quickly drops the 2 for also selling into the warehouse. Looks like JC's in the similar boat as Joon with 12 and spaces. The 1 in a worker will drop his last knowledge tile into play, closing that region. 2 unplayed ones, or at this stage he's down to 11 spaces and 1 unplayed one. 3 and 4 for Joon. 4 will quickly drop the tower into play, closing that region. And yeah, Joon's really been, despite being sort of later in turn order, he noticed that he needed to sort of move orthogonally from the other players, moving into pastures, moving into buildings, and hasn't had to fight as much, getting to, in the middle of the game, pick up some things that were nicer for him, especially pastures worked out well. And JC threw in a couple blocks here and there, but it frankly wasn't... maybe it wasn't enough to slow Joon down. Primarily, they slowed Joon down by preventing him from getting the castles of the dark green castles, because he had set up for that the most. He'd moved towards those castles most aggressively, had claimed an early castles in the game. They boxed him out of the boats. But he very astutely said, okay, I'm going to get out of those. I'm going to focus on some other things. It seems like you two are fighting. And I think that definitely pays some benefits. And we see, it's not crazy. He's only ahead by 10-ish points. He's missed, I imagine, I think he sold far less warehouse goods than any of the other players, who therefore have had more silver coins. Also, their mines are silver coins, which have allowed them to buy things. So the other players, I think, have just straight up taken more actions than Joon has, but his board structure is in a similar state to theirs. And he's managed to score more points than they have, despite those additional warehouse bonuses, warehouse goods sold, because of the value of those pastures. Like a worker, a pair of workers here to grab another building that will give more workers. He will have placed a full 4 by the end of the game, which is pretty impressive. And the last round here, 2-6 for JC, double 6s for Rob. Yep, and Joon actions. Praying. So 2-6 what he wanted. He doesn't look happy about that. I don't fully understand what Joon was looking for there. He has a gazillion workers, so Rob's selling some grapes from the warehouse. Lost. Pick up some coins, and I didn't even see what his other action was. Looks like a worker pickup for JC, who will drop his last pasture tile into play. And basically one pasture tile short of closing, one small yellow area unclosed there. 6 here, maybe with numbers closer to Joon's 4. Triple yellow set. Maybe with numbers closer to 4, Joon was thinking that he would drop the dark green in play. Pick up, drop off, take a free action. And the 2 with a pair of workers to play into the 6. Yeah, maybe, but it seemed like his final play here was entirely fine as well. Because I think if he did the Castles of Burgundy thing, he's still a tile short being able to play everything out. I think that is the way that it is. All right, everyone takes their final coins. I'm not sure what Joon was hoping for with that roll. It didn't seem like it stopped him from accomplishing what he wanted to accomplish, but we'll see. And I think the final scoring here from each of the players, closing into the end here, we see that Joon is leading by about 10. JC's additional points look like they take him to 193, which is certainly not going to be enough to beat Joon here. I have a sense of the remaining resources and has a fair amount of yellow tiles there. Scores and body language suggest the players already know what the outcome of this game is to me. At least 20 points, a little bit more maybe, for a final score of 214, it looks like, 16. And Rob may have some good endgame scoring, but I doubt it's enough to overtake that. He similarly has a couple 4-pointer knowledge tiles. Yeah, it just isn't going to be enough to close the gap. And not a huge blowout or anything like that, and a relatively low-scoring game. I think a lot of times you'll see winning scores 220s, 230s, 240s. But I think this is a lower-scoring map, so a win with 213 or 216 and like that, Rob will move into
surprising.
second. And a couple extra points, putting him over 200, it looks like. And there you have it. Joon wins 216 points, Rob 205, JC at 193. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed.